Welcome back, y'all, to another SEC early predictions preview show, and today we got the Arkansas Razorbacks. Last time out we did Alabama. We are going alphabetical order, team by team, going through an early preview and predictions for their 2021 season. We did Alabama last time. That leads us to Arkansas, and then after Arkansas, we go to Auburn, then Florida, then Georgia, and so on. So, guys, if you love SEC football as much as I do, and I know you probably do, even if you're not a fan of a bunch of these teams, we do a ton of SEC content, so there's a good chance that content for your favorite team will show up sometime in the future. Definitely hit that sub button. Do me a favor, hit that sub button, hit the like button, and let's just sit back, relax, and enjoy this good time talking about the Arkansas Razorbacks. And if I'm going to be honest, Arkansas is probably my third or second favorite team in the SEC. If you know me, I'm a massive South Carolina Gamecocks fan. You could see the jerseys in the background. But other than that, I like Auburn. Not so much this year and the year after that, but like earlier, late 2000s, early 2010s, I really like those Auburn teams. And then Arkansas is right there. I love the Arkansas Razorbacks. In my opinion, Arkansas has maybe the best logos in all of college sports. I'm a huge fan of Arkansas's colors and logos. Great stuff there. We'll get into that later when it shows up. But let's talk about how Arkansas did last season. Because in my SEC Awards show, by the way, if you haven't checked that out, click that little notification up there. I picked Arkansas as my most surprising team of the year, and I think 100% they were. Sam Pittman comes in his first year in Arkansas. Yes, this team only did go 3-7, but this was a team coming off a year where they didn't have any SEC wins, and they come in this year and come away with 3 in an all-SEC schedule, beating teams like who they beat. They beat Ole Miss, they beat Mississippi State, and they beat, who's the last team they beat? They beat, wasn't LSU. Give me a second here, I'll pull it up. Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. That's who it was, the last game against Tennessee. I think I actually picked Arkansas in that game. I do weekly SEC football picks, and I'm pretty sure back then I picked Arkansas to beat Tennessee. So Tennessee also, I forgot to mention, the game against Auburn, that backward spike that should have been called as a fumble that didn't, and then Auburn goes out and kicks a winning field goal. So most Arkansas fans, I agree, would say they went 4-6 this season. In the stat book, it's always going to say 3-7, but you could say 4-6 because that call really did cost them a win. Like, it's not one of those calls that happens early on in the game, and you guys are like, oh, that would have changed the complexion of this game. This actually happened in, like, the last minute of the game and really did cost Arkansas the game, that call. So you could say Arkansas went 4-6 last season, but I think the point is major improvement was made for the Arkansas Razorbacks in this game specifically. I mean, in this season specifically with Sam Pittman, and I think that they're still growing. They're returning a ton of starters this season. Very, very few guys are leaving to go on to the NFL or whatever they're going on to do. Arkansas is returning a lot of the same talent that they had last year. The notable guys who are leaving, obviously Felipe Franks, quarterback, and then Rakeem Boyd, running back. But he wasn't even the lead rusher for the running backs this season because he opted out early. You still had some very, very good talent on this Arkansas team, man, that got them to that 3-7 record. So let's break down. First of all, we got to look at the schedule for the Arkansas Razorbacks because this season, it's 2021 season. The all-SEC schedule is done. It's finished. That was just a one-time COVID thing, and, you know, it worked for the 1 year. It was fun to watch an SEC game every single week. I mean, every single week you saw all SEC games. It was fun. It was enjoyable for me, but you got the regular schedule back. So starting off on September the 4th, you got at home versus Rice. Then you go at home versus Texas, at home versus Georgia Southern. And then you go to AT&T Stadium to play Texas A&M in Arlington. So that's kind of a neutral site game. It's not home, it's not away, but you're playing in Texas still. You still got to travel there. Then you go to Georgia. Then you go to Ole Miss. Then you come back home against Auburn. Then you play Arkansas Pine Bluff at home, who is, I'm guessing they're in Division II FCS team. I don't know a lot about them, but I'm not guessing that they're very good, and that should be a win for Arkansas. Then you have your bye on the 30th, October the 30th. Then November 6th, you're at home versus Mississippi State, and then you go into a big 2-game road trip where you're taking on the LSU Tigers. And then you go to you go to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, at Bryant-Denny Stadium is what I meant to say. And you go take on the Alabama Crimson Tide. And then you come back home, but it's not really their home stadium. They're coming back home to Arkansas, but they're not playing in, DWR Razorback Stadium. I think that's what it's called. You're going to War Memorial Stadium in Little Rock, Arkansas to take on the Missouri Tigers. And then December 4th, it's unlikely, in my opinion, but who knows? Who knows? The SEC Championship is coming up on December the 4th. So those are your schedule and your games for the Arkansas Razorbacks this season. Let's take a look at some of the players they got on this team this year. Their depth chart, what I'm expecting. Obviously, you're going to have, I think, KJ Jefferson is going to be the quarterback for this season. We saw him in a little bit of this season. Obviously, Felipe Franks was the main guy. But when KJ Jefferson came in, it's nothing to make a crazy assumption about and say that he's going to be a really good quarterback. But I think he played decent for when he came in. I think that he was a decent quarterback. Traylon Smith, Arkansas's leading rusher last season, is back, which is huge. I think he rushed for a total of 718 yards, something around there. Treylon Burks, one of the leading receivers in all of the SEC last year, is back. He had an amazing season last year, and that's great to see him suit back up in the Razorbacks red or cardinal, whatever you want to call it. You'll have Mike Woods as your wide receiver 2, Jaquaylin Crawford as your wide receiver 3. It looks like, for the most part, most of the offensive line is returning for the Razorbacks, and then you're going to have Hudson Henry as your tight end still. Defensive side of the ball, again, still pretty much the same. You're going to have most of your D-line back. You're going to have your cornerback still. You're going to have Hudson Clark, who picked off Matt Corral 3 times in that Ole Miss game, and I'm pretty sure he came home with a Walter Camp Defensive Player of the Week that week, because I know J.C. Horn also won it that week, and I think they both shared it because he had 2 interceptions, a couple big pass deflections going up against Seth Williams and Auburn. So that was a big game for him, Hudson Clark. And then on the other side, you're going to have Montrae Brown. Those two. The secondary for Arkansas last year, I thought was pretty good. I thought they were pretty decent. Of course, they had their big games, obviously, against guys like Ole Miss in a very offensive conference. I thought Arkansas did a pretty decent job in the secondary. Like, they didn't give up too many, except for, like, you look at Florida's game, you look at the Missouri game. The points that they let up weren't anything terrible. They weren't anything terrible considering what all these teams were putting up for the most part of the season. Like Alabama and Florida were putting up high numbers all through the season. You look at the recruiting class that Arkansas bring in. They are coming in as the 8th team in the SEC this year, which I think is major improvements for Arkansas. They're close to that top half of the SEC. Their top recruit is Kentron Jackson, 4-star wide receiver out of Rose City, Texas. He's the 26th wide receiver. I think just stacking onto those wide receivers that Arkansas already has is going to be key for them. You got AJ Green, an athlete. They picked up 4 stars, I'm pretty sure. You got AJ Green, an athlete from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and then you got Raheem Sanders, athlete from Rockledge, Florida. Those are your 3 4 stars, and then I can't remember. I think it was like 17 3 stars or something like that. So not a bad class for Arkansas. I definitely take it, and I think that there are definitely some major improvements going on in this Arkansas facility. Time to get into the losses, the toss-ups, and the wins, because this is something that I did for Alabama. This is something that I'm going to go through for every team, and this took me a lot more time than I did for Alabama. Lots more time that I put into this. It was a lot of hard decisions. My original one looked completely different from what I had now, because there was a lot of just looking in and being like, can I really put that there? And here's what I got. So I'll show you guys wins, toss-ups, and losses. First, starting off with the wins, I got it. Mark it down as a win against Rice, Georgia Southern, and UAPB, University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. The Golden Lions, by the way, that logo is insane. That logo is absolutely insane. By the way, talking about logos, I talked about it earlier, how Arkansas logos are probably my favorite in all of college football. The middle Arkansas logo might be my favorite logo in all of college sports. I love that old throwback Razorback that I have in the losses. And then the A, that's just their baseball logo. I just threw that in there. But amazing logos for Arkansas. Just want to point that out there. Toss-ups, I have at Ole Miss, which... that one I was leaning towards. I was thinking about putting it in losses, but Arkansas beat Ole Miss last year. The only thing is I really like Ole Miss this season, and they are staying at home, which I think just makes it really tough for me to throw this, just to be that confident in Arkansas. But Arkansas beat them last year, so I didn't want to throw them in the losses just because of that. So I have Ole Miss in the toss-ups. Auburn I have in the toss-ups for sure. That game was in Auburn last year. They're coming home to play Auburn at home this year. Mississippi State I have in the toss-ups. They beat them last year. And then Missouri played a very, very competitive and fun to watch ball game against Arkansas last season. That game was in Missouri. It came down to the last seconds. I watched the highlights of that one, but that was an amazing game. So Missouri, Mississippi State, Auburn, Ole Miss in my toss-ups, and then losses: Texas A&M, Georgia, Alabama, and LSU. Texas was so close to being in the toss-ups. I wanted, because that game's at home. I say, if that Texas game was in Texas, I would have guaranteed put it in a loss. But at first I had this in the toss-ups just because this game is at home for Arkansas. But I was like, I feel really, really good. Really good about Texas this season. They're bringing back Bijan Robinson. They got Caleb Thompson at quarterback coming in for Sam Ehlinger. That's a good team. They got some really good players out there in Texas this season. And it was hard. It was really hard because I had Texas in my toss-ups originally, but I do have the Texas Longhorns winning that game. Texas A&M, Georgia, and Alabama, I all had in the losses originally. Arkansas is a good team, but I don't see them beating or competing with these teams, especially that all of those are going to be on the road or neutral site. You're at it in Arlington for Texas A&M. You're going to Georgia, and then you're going to Alabama. That is crazy, crazy tough to come out with a win in any of those games, no matter what team you are. And I just don't think Arkansas is at the level right now to go out and beat these teams. It doesn't mean they can't. It's just if I had to bet on it right now, I would mark those down as losses. And then LSU's another one that I originally had in the toss-ups, but then I was like, you going on a 2-game road trip to LSU and to Alabama, and LSU beat you last year, and LSU had a really rough year, although LSU is keeping a lot of talent around. They're losing some guys, they're losing a bunch of guys, but LSU still has talent. Their problem this year was execution with that talent, and I think if LSU just gets figured out, I'm not saying that LSU is going to be a championship contender or a contender for the playoff, but I do think that they could be easily a top 25 team if they just figure out how to use the talent they have. And going to Death Valley, which is one of the hardest places to play in all of college sports, I marked LSU down in the loss category. I had LSU and Texas both in the toss-ups to start. I had Rice, Georgia Southern, UPA, all in the wins. And then my toss-ups, I had Ole Miss, Auburn, Mississippi State, Mizzou, Texas, and LSU. And then my losses were just Texas A&M, Georgia, and Alabama. But the more I thought about it, I felt like I couldn't throw those ones in the toss-ups just because how good I feel like those teams are going to be this season. Although, ceiling or best case scenario for Arkansas, what would I have? I'd say they win those 3 games. They win all of the games in their win category. I see them taking 3 of the toss-up games. Winning all of them is going to be really hard, especially I think Mississippi State and Auburn are going to be winnable games 100%. Missouri at home, I feel good about that one for Missouri, actually. Ole Miss is the one that I'm really like, that one scares me. You go to Ole Miss, you go to Vought Hemingway Stadium in Oxford. That's the one that scares me. So, best case scenario, I have Arkansas winning all 3 of those win games, winning the Missouri, Mississippi State, and Auburn game, and then losing 6 to Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Georgia, Alabama, and LSU. Worst case scenario, I still think, even worst case scenario, I don't have Arkansas going 3-9. I don't think that they're going to be that bad of a team if it does come to the worst. I think they'll take at least one of the toss-up games. And if I had to choose one toss-up game that they'd take, definitely 100% the Mississippi State game. I think that easily could be a win for them. That one, it was also close to being put in the win category. But it's an SEC opponent, and I haven't really seen Mississippi State, although they were the worst team in the West last year. There is room for improvement there, and I don't know what Mike Leach is up to, so I wanted to put that in the toss-up. So, best case scenario, 6-6. Worst case scenario, I'll go 4-8 for the Arkansas Razorbacks. So that's going to be my video for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Arkansas fans, let me know what you think in the comments. Of course, I'm just an SEC fan. I'm kind of an outsider to the program. I don't know as much as you guys do about the Arkansas Razorbacks, so I'd love to hear your guys' opinion about these rankings, because I'm sure that you guys are going to feel awfully strong about that LSU game. That's the one that is definitely the most controversial, because Arkansas played LSU very, very close last year, and I feel like that's the one that I'm definitely going to get the most hate for, is putting LSU in the automatic loss category. It's not to say that it's automatically a loss, but if I had to bet on it, that LSU game would be a loss. The rest of the toss-ups are all games that I can't call yet. And also that Texas game, I feel like you guys aren't going to like that Texas game call too much. So that's my video for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Like the video down below. Comment anything about the Arkansas Razorbacks or SEC football. Subscribe, like the video. Go Hogs, as always. And thank you for watching, and come back next time.